All right, so the first thing we're going to get into is knowing your patterns, and this is the first step because you need to know this before moving on to the other three steps. All right, our last step is honestly the most important one. That's the bread and butter of this video. So stay tuned with me to get that last bit of information. All right, so we're going to move on to the two main types of patterns, and that is a reversal and continuation. All right, and what a reversal is, let's say that the prices were initially bullish and it will eventually end as a bearish price. A continuation is just basically what it is, a continuation of prices moving in either direction. All right, so here's a cheat sheet of reversal chart patterns. So take a moment to write down the names and write down the shape of these patterns. All right, so what we have in front of us is the continuation pattern cheat sheet, okay? And what this is pretty much patterns that continue the initial trend, right? So if you take the time to write down the name and draw out the shapes of these patterns, we will go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so now we are on number two, which is learning how to scout and be patient. This is another crucial step because making a very early decision could be costly, and making a very late decision can be costly. So let's look at this here, right? So you see this little consolidation here above. It's about 5 candles, very small candles. All right, this is a daily chart, so each candle took 24 hours to form. So you can imagine if you actually sold like on the first candle of this peak, you would have been in this trade for about 5 days, and there will be no profit. So as a new trader, you will probably get out of this trade completely or get out just to get back in to go in the opposite direction, thinking that something is about to happen. So if you keep patience in mind, just keeping your patience and sitting on your hands and not really be so quick to trade and hit that execute button, you could make high probability trades. So it's very important to pretty much be patient and scout out these patterns. Once you see a pattern form, or once you see a pattern form, it's good to just kind of hang tight and tell yourself that the pattern may not go as plans or as planned, right? So that's how I keep my patience intact. Once I see, for instance, this double top, once I see the first peak forming and it falls off the first peak to create that neckline, I tell myself it may not bounce off this neckline to create the second peak. It may just break through the neckline, right? And if that doesn't happen and it starts to create the second peak, I wait for that neckline to be broken so I know that this is a actual double top and it will be a very bearish move, right? So that's what keeps you patient, all right? Is setting those rules for yourself. And once a pattern do what you want it to do pretty much, or once that pattern follow your rules, then it's okay to execute a trade, right? So we're not going to spend too much time on this step, but I thought it was important to add it. right, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so step three is identifying patterns, setting zones, and adjusting your zones, right? So you will start to identify patterns once you've learned what patterns look like and then start to scout for them. And when I say scout, look, so scouting and identifying is two totally different things when it comes to speculating the market. So if I'm scouting for patterns, right? So let's say double top is my favorite. I'm scouting charts to look for that pattern forming, right? So think about sports, right? When you're scouting for college players or high school players, you're looking at a person that's developing, right? They're not fully developed yet, right? Because if they were, they would be in the pros, fully developed, ready to go, skills on mats, right? But in high school, you're still developing those skills, and that's what you need to think about in forex. The pattern is still developing, so you need to train your eye to see. For example, we're going to use the double top for this example. So you want to train your eye to see that first peak and that neckline being formed. So that way you can say, hey, this is developing into a pro double top rather than this amateur double top that I'm seeing right now. Right? So when you get to this step, you are pretty much seeing that double top forming the first peak and then the neckline and headed to pretty much form that second peak. Now you've identified a pattern, right? And once you identify a pattern, set your zones. What do I mean about setting zones? Well, once that first peak and that neckline has formed, you will want to put a line right at that neckline to remind you of that price area of your neckline, right? So that's like our minor support area, right? Support is floors, resistance is the ceiling, right? So that first peak, I'm going to put a horizontal line there and label it as my resistance area. That is setting zones. Now, as prices move, like I showed you here, right? Um, you have to adjust those zones because those peaks won't be perfect. And what I mean by perfect is it makes a peak and then shoot down from it, right? As you notice that second peak, it pretty much held out for a few days. So you want to adjust your levels as you go. So the next day, if prices might it may have pushed up maybe 5 to 10 pips above your original peak or above your original resistance line, you will want to kind of move your line up and down, to adjust it, because not adjusting your lines is super deadly, because it makes your chart appear, right? Keyword, it makes your chart appear as if something's about to happen, when really you just need to adjust your zones and kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture. All right, so that's pretty much it for this slide. Now let's get to the juiciest slide. All right, so here is the best part of the video. All right, and it's step 4, and it is called trading accordingly. All right, so this means that you need to be very attentive on what time frame you are on, what pair you are trading, and what session you are in. And of course, make sure there are no news releases, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But as of right now, let's focus on trading accordingly, right? And the first thing we're going to go over are sessions. What is sessions? Okay, so some people may know this, some don't, but the banks move the markets. Okay, deep pockets move the markets. All right, so if I'm a billionaire and I decide to put $1 million on a trade, that's going to more than likely push that trade down a couple of points, right? So the big wigs of the markets are the deep pockets. All right. So banks, for instance, all the major banks, all right, will will move the market. So the major bank of USA, right? So the major financial institution, right? I'm not just talking about Bank of America, and I'm talking about all the major banks all under one umbrella, right? One financial department, right? So, if this is represented by the U.S. and the U.S. decide to put millions of dollars into USD, whatever, USD versus another currency, that is going to make that currency pair move tremendously. Us, aka retail traders, regular Joes, 9 to 5ers, who decide to trade, we are called retail traders, right? Our little money, our little $100 or our little $1,000, even $10,000, that won't move the market at all, right? It's the millions of dollars. It's the deep pockets that are moving the market. So with that in mind, you need to trade accordingly, meaning that you need to trade with the banks. Write this down. Trade with the banks and not against them. All right. So what does that mean? That means that what step is that? I'll let you figure that out. But you need to be patient, right? So what step is that? Exactly. So figure it out. We just went over it. All this have to line up. So you need to be patient and wait for one, a pattern or something to form out to let you know, hey, this is what it's going to be, right? And you need to look at your timing and your session time to know what is being moved. Okay, so if I am looking at the Aussie dollar versus the Japanese yen, which is AUD/JPY, right? What session will I trade that? I'm going to trade that more than likely in the Asian range and the Australian range, right? The Asian range pretty much happens right before the Australian range, right? So those two ranges pretty much cross over, all right? So that means I will be wanting to trade Aussie dollar versus the Japanese yen during a Asian session time and during an Australian session time, right? Because those banks are the ones that the Australian banks are using Aussie dollars to buy and sell pairs, right? So if they're using Aussie dollars to buy and sell pairs, guess what Aussie is going to do? It's going to either drop or rise a bunch of points. And that's what trading is. If Aussie rises 50 points, I want to be in the position to ride that rise, right? I want to ride the rise. I know that sounds alike, but I want to trade accordingly. I want to trade with the banks and not against them, right? So when prices are shooting up, what I mean about against them, I don't want to say, nah, this is fake. I'm going to sell while it's going up so I can catch it soon as it turns. No, that doesn't work. It only works for certain situations and special circumstances. Okay, so you will want to look at that session time chart, which I just showed. Okay, I still have it up. So just look at this, study it, write down the times, and look at your watch and see what pairs are moving for that session timing. Okay, usually Euro USD like to move during London, which is overnight, 3 a.m. So if you're up overnight, and you want to trade Euro USD or GBP, any Euro or any European pairs, you can trade it overnight. Just be aware of what day it is, because most of the time at the beginning of the week, pairs aren't moving, right? So you should use Sunday and Monday to scout, to set zones, all right, to practice patience, to figure out what's going on. And usually, the end of the week, prices are moving or it stops, right? So it varies, but as a trader, that's your job. That's part of the job. If this was easy, everybody would be trading, right? So this what makes you special. This what makes you stand out. That you have enough knowledge or enough sense and enough patience to learn what to do in many different situations. Should I trade? Should I wait? Should I scout? Should I adjust zones? It's all a part of the game. All right. So study this time frame or study this session time, because this is literally important, the very most important thing, right? So again, next you will want to make sure there are no news releases on your pair, right? You don't want to blindly trade Euro USD when there's about to be a news release during the US Open. Okay, so you can trade Euro USD. Going back to my London example, you can also trade this currency pair during the US Open. So people are scouting this pair during the London session and the U.S. session, which is 8 or 9 a.m. depending on what side of America you live on. I'm Eastern, so I'm starting to look at my charts around 9 a.m. That's the Bloomberg. I got the Bloomberg app too, so download that, and they do the opening bell. So they do the opening bell. They show you, I believe they show you news releases. I'm not sure. But Owanda, my broker, that's how I look at the news releases, to see who will be having a major news release, because that does affect the movement of your currency pair. Just keep in mind, if there's a red dot beside that country, that means there's going to be a high news release, meaning that uh, that news release will, without a doubt, make your pair move up or down tremendously. All right. If it's yellow, it will make it move just a little, and if it's green, it's not going to have that much of an impact. Okay. So just keep that in mind to make sure there are no news releases. So that can be your homework every week on Sunday when you're not supposed to be trading. You could be looking at news releases and seeing, what do I have ahead of me? What news will, which news will be released at a high impact, which news will be released at a low impact, and what currency pair will that impact, right? So now you got your session timing down, you got your news releases down. Now the time of day, right, which is session time. So it all comes together, right? So, like I said, Sundays and Mondays, you typically want to use those days for scouting, setting zones, seeing what the week got for you, far as news releases. So please be very, very mindful of this last step. Just be very patient. Like I said, know your patterns. Go over 1, 2, and 3, and by the time you get to step 4, you've already scouted a pattern or a trend and identify a pattern or a trend. And now, far as an entry point, you want to make sure there are no news releases. And then you want to make sure you are in the proper time frame and session, right? So if I am trading Euro USD and the second peak has formed like around 3 a.m., And I'm telling myself, look, the second peak has formed. It's this is a true double top. I think I want to sell this because it's Euro USD, right? For one, for two, it's the London session, so I am in the right session with the right currency pair. Three, I've identified a pattern that's pretty much it pretty much formed, and I'm ready to sell. And now four, I need to do is choose a time frame. So typically you will want to look at the higher time frames first to make sure everything is lined up. So you want to make sure that a sell looks good on a daily chart, and then you want to go down to your 4 hourly chart and make sure the sell look good on that, and then you want to go down to your hourly chart to make a precise sniper like entry, right? So the hourly will be a little bit more choppy, so you can kind of get in there and identify pullbacks, basically prices getting higher to sell, right? Because you want to sell at the highest price. Okay, so once you got all those lined up, boom, you've entered the trade. You have sniper like entries because you've got everything lined up to a T. All right, so this is pretty much it for this part of the lesson. All right, is I know it was pretty quick, but um I want to keep things simple. All right. So if you follow these steps and be patient and wait for breakouts and wait for the market to show you, you're good, right? You can get into a trade on a 4 hourly chart and be okay for at least for the next 4 hours of that session time. So if I was to sell at 3 a.m. during London, right? On a 4 hourly chart, I can go to sleep. I can go to bed because I know by the time I wake up 7 a.m., London is still rolling. I could, I can probably start to look to either exit my trade or slow down, or exit my trade or add on to my position for the U.S. Um, session, because these banks, they like to set each other up for the run, right? So London may or may not move, right? But if it does move, just keep in mind it's probably moving to be set up for US. So if it's a bearish move throughout overnight throughout London session, it may be getting set up to kind of straddle the support line and then go up into a bullish move for the New York session. So it all depends. Sometimes the New York session will continue what London has did. Sometimes London won't move at all and it would just consolidate for US, right? So there's a lot of approaches to this. So you got to keep all of them in mind and be prepared for all of them. All right, so that's pretty much it for this video. Remember, please, please, please subscribe, hit that like button for more. Please comment. I reply to everybody. Um, as you can see, this is totally free, right? So if you need to replay this video, go ahead. If you need to pause, take a break, write down some things, go ahead. But the pause is your best friend, right? So pause things and rewind if you need to go over things. If I need to work on explaining something a little better, I am all for criticizing, right? So criticize me. I'm all for criticism. Please put that in the comment box as well. If you have a Facebook page, please like and follow Teach Me FX. All right, FX, Teach Me FX, which is FX 360. And you will see a lot of updates on that. All right, until then, happy trading and see you next time. You want, with all, I don't know that you do. I don't want to think I don't wait for the you want, you